welcome everybody to our Automating Repo event. Really delighted to have so many of you with us. Thank you for registering and thank you very much for sparing a couple of hours of your afternoon. I'm Richard Baker. I'm the founder of Tokenovate, and this afternoon my colleagues are littered around to chat with you, but we're a UK deep tech fintech. And we set out a few years ago to start to turn complex capital markets contracts into logical step-by-step instructions, seeking to create automated workflows for efficient collateral mobility and post-trade lifecycle management. And at the heart of that, and perhaps to kick off if you're not familiar with it, we took a step back and looked at a foundational component that we felt would make that possible. And that component is the open source domain-specific language model called the Common Domain Model, CDM. And you'll hear this a few times as we go through the afternoon. But of course, CDM, which started about 7 or 8 years ago, is a collaboration between ISDA, ICMA, and ISLA, and today sits in the Finos open source community as a foundational tool, really, to underpin digital standards, the digitization of event workflow, and of course, that's a segue into how we think about the journey to automation. And we embed that common domain model in a broader platform that is harnessing highly parallelized scalability, programmability, and blockchain and tokenization technology. And today we're going to take you on a journey and show you some of that. So when we think about some of the dynamics that are going on in the world, and I'm going to talk about a few of these things. Of course, the repo market stands out as an asset class, as a product that is subject to much discussion and need for transformation. But when we talk about automating repo, what do we think the ultimate automation endgame looks like? And this is a broader topic for capital markets. It is about harnessing those digital standards. It's about creating programmability of asset classes for the future. And it's about seamless to front to back office trade and settlement life cycle experiences. We need to remove friction that's in the system. So we hope today we can make an engaging discussion, setting context to our industry as it is today, looking at some of the change pillars that are upon us in the next couple of years, and casting an opinion on what the future might look like and how we get there. And so we're going to try and do some time travel this afternoon. And that time travel forces us into what could the post-2027 world look like when we think about some of the reform that we need to get through in the next 2 years. And we're going to try and drag that moment in time into this room this afternoon and put it to action and get you engaged in that journey. So, are you ready to go on that journey this afternoon? Yes. So, let's set context. Today we have, post myself doing this introduction, we have a wonderful demonstration to take you through. And following that, we have a very vibrant, dynamic panel that will tackle some of the topics that I set scene to now and really open up the discussion further. And after that panel, we hope certainly that there's put enough thoughts in your head that you feel like you want to interact with the panel and talk through some of the things that we'll have gone through this afternoon. So, of course, when I stand back, repo is globally, systemically important. It is, of course, the engine oil of our modern markets. At a foundational level, it is a product that enables temporary transfer of ownership of collateral. It's how institutions turn collateral into cash, powering short-term security funding that keeps liquidity flowing across our financial ecosystem. You all know the size and shape of this market, and depending on sources, but we are today sitting with a US market that exceeds 12 trillion. And we're sitting with the recent ICMA survey report with the European market, somewhat compressed, but just under 11 trillion. And this is powering everything from sovereign debt to derivative margining. It is a critical source of liquidity. But again, as ICMA recently mentioned in the 2025 report, this critical market is still encumbered by legacy systems, siloed systems, manual reconciliations, and delayed settlement. And in a world where we now have digital rails and real-time payment systems, why are we still seeing repo settling 2 days later? Structural change is upon us. I think the wonderful work we've seen here in the UK by Andrew Douglas in chairing the T+1 task force has really animated some of those critical changes that are emerging. And beyond the UK, of course, the US has tackled this through the journey towards US Treasuries clearing, which is upon us for 26-27. The T+1 settlement is global and requires harmonization. And we have the date of the 11th of October 2027 for us to collaborate around and focus on. But it doesn't stop there. Of course, at the heart of this is about accessibility to high quality liquid assets. How do we continue to be able to access real-time assets at a point where we're seeing the removal of quantitative easing and quantitative tightening in most of our markets? And so that, coupled with the Basel III reform, is really giving challenges to the recalibration of available liquidity. And of course, we have regulatory reform, the SEC, ESMA, and the CSDR. And all of this compiles at a time where we are seeing the modernization of infrastructure with the rise of digital ledger technology and the rise of programmable techniques like tokenization. So, time travel one. Let's jump to that future. It's always nice to think about a North Star when you're facing a change transformation program. What do we think the market could look like? And so I think if we imagine that new future, that we've hit successfully the T+1 milestone, and we've seen this regulatory transformation, then could we expect that we have a fully cleared US market, repo market clearing? Only recently have we seen discussion from the Bank of England about the possibility of introducing clearing in the UK. And we are certainly seeing that European repo clearing is upon us. And therefore, we've got another phase of interoperability to think about. Of course, digital assets, as they start to intersect as potential payment rails, run today on T0 settlement. So T+1 is not the end state. It is a transition state. And I think really for market participants, as they look at their change programs, their new technology, and indeed culture that goes with that, which I'll touch on in a second, we really need to be thinking through the T+1 milestone to how we think about the modernization of the middle office. I think there is a future where the back office that we have known and loved for 30 years perhaps will not exist in the future. I think we are going to see a much more intelligent front to middle office that rests on digital techniques and automation that really removes that hardship of reconciliations and the challenges of orchestrating the payment and settlement cycles. Technology fabric has been very difficult for capital markets. We have over 15 different blockchains running around the world in capital markets today. The journey of private ledgers that then became permissioned public ledgers that also ahead are permissioned as public ledgers. And we have experimentations on all three formats. Most capital markets firms experimented early in private ledger technology, but I think we have now seen industry settle in the last 2 years that the future is a public ledger, but the topic of privacy remains the biggest challenge to the outright adoption of these tools. And so with that technology fabric working its way through in terms of sharing understanding, experimentation coming to a close, and we see now most pilots needing to be scale-up programs, it is no longer something about MVPs and experimentation. It is about the transformation of these workflows. I think one of the most exciting things in this strategic shift is the reform of liquidity and the paradigm shift to thinking about tokenized money, digital money of all sorts. I think when we imagine either digital twins, meaning we're representing the books and records of off-chain money, bonds, gilts, in blockchain technology, and the blockchain technology giving us the freedom, the speed and the velocity in digital rails. But of course, we will see increasingly native digital assets. So those combination of representing collateral assets, either as digital twins or indeed as natively created digital assets, really bring a paradigm shift to all asset classes. But we have to accept there is a hybrid state, and therefore actually to the core of repo, this concept of property rights and title over rights is at the heart of how we think about tokenization. And that leaves me to the legal reform. Whilst regulators push for secure and safer markets, at the heart of this, of course, is our belief in you can really only underpin change in markets through standards. And we have trusted master service agreements and collateral schedules across the ISDA, ICMA, and ISLA workflows in our industry. And it's really exciting to think about how we harness those 40 years of heritage and bring them into the digital paradigm and get them to work as programmable conditional logic and help us drive the modernization of markets in an organized way. So I mentioned Andrew Douglas. So the report, the Accelerated Settlement Task Force report, is truly foundational. It was interesting to see that our government really praised Andrew's and the working party's work recently, but it sets out 27 core considerations that underpin change in the next 18 months. And we won't go through all 27 of those today, but I've summarized some of those friction pillars that exist through our systems today. And I've talked about some of this already. But I guess really, as we've seen, the output of the report really gets to a point where our systems and our markets are going to change very significantly over the next 2 to 3 years. And there is a change program that we need to execute through. And there's nothing more like, I think, a focus on we live and get excited by good volatility, but bad volatility ultimately serves as really significant moments of stress. And we have seen a number of times in those moments of stress, banks pull back from providing liquidity in the repo market, of course, through their risk parameters. And it tells us that as we continue to live in highly volatile times, that we do not have the mechanisms to really manage that volatility and those stress points into the future. But of course, what we've got is the opportunity to really reform and make a lot more collateral accessible in a much higher cadence and improve the velocity of money. So as I think about those pillars, the challenge is how are we going to get there? And I think at its heart, we are amidst a change program, a strategic change program in capital markets. Repo is just one asset class, but we see the same pattern across every asset class. So strengthening that collateral optimization and intraday funding is critical to this journey. Streamlining and automating post-trade and modernizing the mid-office, and ideally doing that based on a foundation like the common domain model, becomes critical to this journey. I think as we're seeing out of the US and we will see in Europe, direct and indirect access to central clearing becomes critically important for market participants. And as I've cited already, and you're going to see today, harnessing digital ledger technology and tokenization is fundamental now to how we think about the modernization of global hyper-connected infrastructures. And I think for those that are really truly excited by this, and my colleague Kieran is, it is about the journey of legal contracts becoming digitized and standardized legal representations of both the life cycle events of the trade workflow, but also the settlement events, is actually with us today. It is a tangible tool as a domain model language that allows us to drive this workflow of the future. And as I hope we do today, I'm a big believer that you have to demystify all of this because it is too intimidating at times, and certainly the technology stack. How do we knowledge share? How do we remove the fear of these new tools, of these new techniques, and make it tangible for everybody? Because it does involve reskilling our teams and taking our talented teams on a new journey to a modern T0 middle office future. And so with that, I've done my first bit of time travel in that I cast us in our minds to 2030, life beyond 2027. But we built Tokenovate to underpin a future that is T0. And so with that, I have my own mad scientist in the room. And that mad scientist is our good friend, Steve Haig, who is our CTO. And he's going to take you on bringing that future into the room through a demonstration of our platform. And so thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy walking through how this actually looks and works in reality. Let me also say before he comes to the stage, we're here to talk about how this platform serves your business and helps this change journey. So please don't be shy in engaging us today. We want to talk about the various stages that underpin the journey that you're on in your firms. We have run a number of programs over the last 18 months, which has brought us to today. And thank you to all of the partners that are here that have been helping us. But we are ready to interact around showcasing demos to your firms. We can take your data, your trade capture data, and transform it and put it through these models and show you it fully automated for these asset classes. And indeed, as you're going to see, there is a very exciting component around how we think about tokenized settlement and how we think about serving that new collateral mobility use case.